Welcome back into the Fade the Field Fantasy Football channel. Today we're going to be starting off with a would you rather here. Would you rather have player 1 holding down 101 targets, 54 catches for 734 yards, with 3 touchdowns, 18% of the total team target percentage, 15% of the total offensive yard percentage with first round draft capital, or player 2 with 93 targets, 63 catches, 628 yards, 4 touchdowns, 16% of their offense's target share, 15% of their team's offensive yardage, and first round draft capital. This will help show that you're making the wrong moves in your Dynasty League. Let's get into the content. Moving on to our first player we're talking about today, we have Jameson Williams. He's ranked as the wide receiver 26 on Keep Trade Cut, 60th player overall, and he finishes a wide receiver 22 in 2024. I am advising to sell Jameson Williams now on the reason of the Lions' passing offense last year was incredibly dominant to some numbers that we've never seen out of a team like that, and I don't think that's necessarily sustainable. This could go for the Lions' passing offense as a whole. However, I still think Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to hold down his target volume. I think Sam Laporta will actually have an uptick compared to last year's finish, but Jameson Williams is the one that I think takes the brunt of the fall here out of them. Here's an interesting stat about JMO. If you took away his longest reception every game, which I understand is not a realistic thing, he's a deep threat guy, he's going to have those long targets. He only would have finished with 488 yards, 43 catches, and 2 touchdowns for 103.8 fantasy points overall. These are numbers similar to guys like Christian Watson, Jalen Naylor, Devon Vele, and truthfully, it takes over half of his fantasy points for him. So even if you cut his total long targets down and long catches completed in half, I mean, he's really falling off and then around the wide receiver 40 range rather than up in this wide receiver 22 range. And at 24 years old, he's still a viable young asset that you could try and recoup value from. Looking at some of the trades that have been done lately, moving off of him for Devontae and a second round pick, I mean, Devontae Adams' 1 year of success may be more productive than a single season JMO has the rest of his career. Also moving off of him for the 203 and Zach Charbonnet, I don't mind that at all. Even attaching a first-round pick, although it's late, to go and get Devonta Smith and a second back in return. I love that back. Devonta Smith is someone that has a stable floor, a limited ceiling, but still will give you almost guaranteed wide receiver 2 numbers every single year. And finally, going to get Brian Robinson, a second and a third, in an offense that looks to be on the uptick, and the rushing game will get some increased work too. These are all prices where I'm comfortable selling Jameson Williams at. Moving on to our next asset, we're talking about the 103 pick in our rookie drafts. That's something that I have as a buy. Really, you're looking at the ceiling asset of a first-round running back in a Marion Hampton there if the 102 manager wants to take a shot on Ted McMillan, or you get the floor of a guaranteed first-round wide receiver in Ted McMillan. The lowest out of the 4 major consensus mock drafts I've seen is Ted McMillan going 20th overall, and looking at the rates of a top 20 wide receiver selected since 2019, 53% of receivers in that range hit a boom, whereas the floor of the boom, of course, would be like Jalen Waddle, someone who did increase in value over time, but didn't necessarily hit their ceiling. And the best, of course, the CeeDee Lambs, Jamar Chase, Malik Neighbors, those guys as well. Looking at the percentages as a whole, of the top 20 wide receivers, there's an 18% chance that they end up as a top 3 Dynasty wide receiver peak. These are Jamar Chase, these are Justin Jefferson. I think even Malik Neighbors now is pushing himself up into the top 3 wide receivers. Some trades I'm looking at going and trying to get the 103. You see George Kittle, the 209, the 108. I'm comfortable giving up Kittle on top of a later first to go and get 103. Giving up DK Metcalf and Isaiah Pacheco. Very comfortable with that despite DK's new contract. You're never going to see the peak wide receiver 1 upside of DK that you could see from Ted McMillan here at the 103. That you could get that level of production from Hampton if he ends up at the 103. There's also giving up a 207 and the 105 to go and get 103. I think the 207's a low hit rate pick, so you end up still moving up a couple spots and giving up maybe a 20% chance of a fantasy relevant player at some point in their career. There's also the option of going and selling Bucky Irving straight up for the 103, and this is a great option that we're about to touch even more on next, as the next sell is Bucky Irving. Bucky's rated as the RB7 overall on Keep Trade Cut, the 27th overall player, and finished last year at the RB13. Bucky is someone whose offense is probably going to look to struggle a little bit more last year now that Liam Cohen is gone and out of the offense. It's still going to be a pass-first offense. Baker's going to have a ton of volume. Mike Evans is back. Chris Godwin's back. McMillan's primed for a breakout if he gets the amount of targets he needs. I also just like other running backs around this spot more. Even if you can give up a little bit to go get Achane, go get Brees, even Saquon if you're a real contender, those are all viable options for you. Looking at a few trades that have been completed, we have DK straight up. We have Rome straight up, which we'll also touch on a little bit later. We have Drake London for Bucky in the 113. I don't mind this at all. I like Drake London going forward much more and much more securely than I have Bucky Irving going forward, even with the 113. Then we also have Bucky, a first and a second, to go and get Darnell Mooney, Nico Collins in the 306. I mean, you don't need to get Mooney back in the 306 for that trade to be worth it, in my opinion. Nico Collins is that good of a player. Moving back to what we kicked the video off with, we are comparing 2024 Rome Odunze to 2023 Jackson Smith-Njigba. Now, Smith-Njigba is viewed at this point as a top 15 at the worst dynasty wide receiver. And last year at this time, he was sagged down low just like Rome Odunze is as well. And I am ready to capitalize and not make the same mistake on Rome that I did on Jackson Smith-Njigba. So I am pressing to target and buy Rome Odunze for the upcoming season. Right now, he's down to wide receiver 17. He's 36 overall on keep trade cut. And last year, he only finished as wide receiver 49, but he was sharing targets with DJ Moore, with Keenan Allen, and Caleb Williams hadn't quite broke out yet. This is an offense that's extremely high caliber, and they've been making moves for the past 2 off seasons to try and improve it. They took Caleb first overall, Rome also in the first round. They added Ben Johnson from the Lions, who helped that historic offense run last year, and now most of the mock drafts have them taking a first or second round running back as well. This is seeming like a team that's going to have a lot of youth on the offensive side of the ball that they're trying to get to mesh together and hit some home runs. And I think Rome could be the biggest benefactor out of all of this. Looking at some of the trades that have been done, we have this first trade, which boils down really to a first for Rome straight up, which I'll make that trade every time. We also have getting the 103 back with Rome for Brian Thomas. I'm not as high on Brian Thomas's consensus, but I do understand that he's a very valuable receiver. I think adding and down tiering to Rome while picking up the 103 might be the correct move there. Then you have Jaden Reed straight up for Rome and Najee Harris in the 110 for Rome Odunze as well. These are all prices I feel very comfortable going to get Rome Odunze at. I think his breakout is coming this year, and I think there's a chance he finishes as a top 10 fantasy wide receiver in this upcoming season already. Moving on to our next sell, we do have Derrick Henry, everyone's favorite running back for the last 10 years. He's right now ranked at the RB 18 on Keep Trade Cut, the 67th overall asset, and last year he finishes RB 4. Henry's someone whose value has almost no choice but to go down from here. He's 31 years old, in a good offense, in a good situation, and there is a chance that he wins you a championship on your team this year. But I do not think that 1 year of success is worth the type of value you could get back for him. Look at some of these trades. These are real trades that people are doing sourced from Dynasty Daddy. Most of these are from paid leagues, not just any other home league. These are all leagues that have been submitted by people that care, and people are also using the same resource. Derrick Henry in the 205 for Nico Collins. Derrick Henry straight up for T. Higgins. Those are jokes of a trade. If you can do that in your league, reach out to those managers and try to do that as soon as you can. There's also a trade with talking about Rome Odunze like we did a little bit earlier, adding George Kittle to Derrick Henry and still getting a first back. I mean, this is a slam dunk of a trade that we are seeing actively happening. I would keep pushing these trades, try and get them as much as you can. There is plenty of value out there. You won't know it until you search for it. If you like the content, make sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you're looking for more buy and sell targets to help you dominate your league this season, please reach out to me in the comment section of this video or reach out to me on Twitter @KeenBryan to get access to all of my rankings, to get a custom team review built for your league settings, and your custom values as well. Now, let's get back into the video for more buys and sells. Moving on to a little bit lower tier of a buy, a little bit cheaper than the rest. We have David Njoku. He's a tight end 13 on Keep Trade Cut. Overall, 124th player, and last year he finished as a tight end 11. Njoku really is at the rock bottom of potential points scored out of that offense. The Browns are in misery. That franchise has struggled for years, and it does not look like an end's coming soon. But no matter what, Njoku's kept pushing. kept playing quality football and giving us good points in our fantasy lineups. Last year, he scored 2 points per game less than Brock Bowers. And I truthfully think you could go get Njoku for a tenth of the price that you could get Bowers at right now. Looking at some of these trades, Ramondre straight up for Njoku, Baker Mayfield straight up for Njoku, and this is a one quarterback league, so it's not like it's a super flex league where Baker's going very high, and both of these are also non-tight end premium leagues. You could probably buy him for that cheap as long as your league's also non-tight end premium. And really, looking down at this next trade with Cedric Tillman and Dallas Goedert for Njoku, that is a tight end premium league, and you're still getting him very cheap. There's also the 207 for Njoku, which is about what I feel comfortable with in this rookie draft. Once you start to get up to the 203, 202, then I'm starting to question whether buying Njoku is worth it. But as you can see, you can get Njoku for very cheap in some of your leagues, and he's still a budget option that can give you a ton of points at the tight end spot. Now again, we're targeting the 109 here to buy as well. This is more so based on tier breaks and guys that you can get there. I'm pretty confident that you will not get Ashton Genty, Omarion Hampton, or Teteroa McMillan here. But that leaves you with a pool of Egbuka, Henderson, Judkins, Burden, Golden, or Warren. I think those guys are in a tier of their own compared to the rest of the class. Based on some of the landing spots we've seen, some of the draft capital, we're starting to get a more clear picture. And even though the draft may not go as some of these mocks project, things may go up in value, things may go down. I do not see a world where this 109 moves down in value, because regardless of where the running backs go in the draft, they're still going to hold so much value based on all the talk around this class and the quality of it. And at the wide receiver position, most of these guys are projected first round, if not early second round capital, and they're still going to be floating around in this range where you aren't going to be losing out by going to get this pick rather than trying to target a higher pick. Some real trades that have happened. Chris Godwin and DK Metcalf both straight up for 109. I like 109 a little bit more in those situations. DK is a little bit of a question mark because of the size of that contract. But like I said, you're betting on a lottery ticket here of one of these guys to explode and perform extremely well. Whereas DK, you know what you're going to get. Maybe a high wide receiver 2 ceiling with a lower floor depending on injury risk, things like that. Also, if you only have to give up the 212 to move up from the 112 to the 109, I'm smashing that every single time. Same thing with giving a future first to go to 109. Even though the odds are not in your favor on that trade, that the 27 first most likely will be earlier than 109, I'm confident enough in this group and the ability that things gain value over time that I'm making that trade almost 100% of the time. Looking here at Terry McLaurin, he's next up on the sell list. He's currently the wide receiver 29 on Keep Trade Cut, 66th overall, and finished as a wide receiver 7 last year. McLaurin is another guy like Derrick Henry is that's at the absolute peak of his value. These players will not get younger, and no matter how quality the production is, they will not get any more expensive than they currently are right now. And McLaurin is a name value since he doesn't have that much league experience. Most people don't know that he's 29 years old. You're able to get some real trade buzz going by throwing a middle-aged receiver on the block, like Terry McLaurin, and seeing what the interest is for people. I'm also not in on his target volume for this upcoming year not being affected by Deebo Samuel like some are. They run a similar route tree. I know McLaurin has much more of the deep route, less of the yak ability than Deebo, but still, the middle room where they operate and where you get that PPR point bonus, Terry McLaurin is really going to be hit in total target volume from Deebo Samuel coming to town there. Some real trades that we've seen go down. We've seen a first and a second for Terry. I'm okay taking that gamble as long as that 2026 first is not going to be too late. We've also seen having to add a second to go and get A.J. Brown, which I am, again, doing every single time. A.J. Brown is only a year younger, but I think he has a much longer upside and a much higher ceiling as well. You also see selling the 108 to get Terry McLaurin, which I'm in on. Of course, Adonai Mitchell in the 305 practically wash out at this point, which is a shame. Adonai has a ton of potential. Then there's also the 109 for Terry McLaurin with Trey Benson in the 2026 second washing out. I'm comfortable to go get those draft picks at this price. One of the most dirt cheap buys that you could get right now, and I would recommend it to every single contender, is to go and try and get Darnell Mooney. He's the wide receiver 56 on Keep Trade Cut, the 152nd overall player, and finished as a wide receiver 31 last year. Darnell Mooney is 27 years old. He is the age that people think Terry McLaurin is. And he still has plenty of long-term upside with this Falcons team, with Michael Penix's potential breakout, Drake London holding down some of the defensive attention, Bijan, of course, demanding people in the box. Mooney's someone that's going to be able to be there and be a little bit of a PPR magnet. Mooney finished with 12.1 points per game last season, which was only 1.9 points behind DJ Moore, yet you can go and get Mooney for an absolute fraction of the price. I mean, look at some of these. You don't even have to give a second, 2/3 and 2/4 to go get Mooney, Jordan Mason to go get Mooney. I'm smash accepting those trades every single time. A second round pick for Mooney, Rachaad White. I'm absolutely liking Mooney over any of those values. And while we're on the topic, and while we talked about the DJ Moore comparison, we need to realize that fantasy games are rarely decided by those 2-point margins that you would be down tiering from DJ Moore to Darnell Mooney to get, that you down tier from Bowers to Njoku to go and get. Those so rarely decide a fantasy football game, and the only reason you may think they do and that they have the notion of it is because you really remember those games where you only lose by a point or you only win by a couple points. But in reality, it's something like 70% of fantasy football games are won or lost by double-digit points. So those small upticks or downticks in points per game are really not making that large of an effect on your fantasy team. The last player we want to touch on here, and I know the market is already starting to slide out on Kenneth Walker, but I'm still selling him even at this price. He's down to the running back 13, 44th player overall. Last year he finishes the RB27. I do not think Kenneth Walker's value is ever going to go up from here, similar to how I feel about some of the older guys, but his is a different situation. Kenneth Walker's coming up on a contract year this season and was outplayed, honestly, by Zach Charbonnet last year. And if you don't think he was outplayed, he was at least getting his workload eaten into by Charbonnet kind of emerging, having a successful year. And I think it's almost a cut your losses with Walker at this point. If you didn't get out on him after his first couple years, now would be an okay time to still. If you're looking at netting the 112, getting a second round pick back as well, I think I'm comfortable doing that and just re-rolling on a better running back from a better running back class. You could also go get Jalen Waddle. You could move Josh Downs and Kenneth Walker to go get Rome and Jalen Wright. I mean, I'm paying up, adding that extra Josh Downs to go get Rome with Kenneth Walker. For sure, I'd do that every single time. And then being able to go and get the 107 for Kenneth Walker, you also have to pay your second round pick. Like I've said before, those second round picks really are not as valuable as most leagues suggest. Alright guys, those were 10 separate players that I have 10 very different opinions on. Thank you for watching today's video. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and soon I will have a video covering some of the activities that have happened in the LFFL lately. We've had about 6 or 7 trades go down since I last talked to you guys about it, but that'll be coming up later this week. But for now, I'll see you guys later. Peace.